Good evening, good afternoon, guys. I'm Emmanuel Timopese, sports journalist for my network Stat TV show. Today, I'm gonna have a special guest, Chief Surgeon for the Montreal Canadiens, and he has a name at the Trauma Center at the Montreal General Hospital, Mr. David Mulder. Check it out. Mr. Mulder,
Yes.
good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you.
And how's life? How's your family?
Everybody's well, thank goodness.
Let's go back all the way to the beginning. Talking about your early beginning. Born and raised in East Saskatchewan.
I was born in Eston, Saskatchewan. It's a small farm town in the southwest corner of the province, maybe 100 miles from Saskatoon. And I grew up on a farm, and there wasn't much to do there in the winter except play hockey. So I started playing hockey when I was very young and played all the way through amateur hockey to the juvenile level, which is a step below junior hockey. And the little town won the provincial juvenile hockey championship. And so, like every prairie boy, I wanted to play in the NHL. And so I thought I had it made, and my hockey coach told me I never had the talent to play in the NHL, and he suggested I go to university, which was good advice.
What was the decision factor? Because you say you played hockey, and then after that, you went to medicine. What was the decision factor to make that transition?
Well, I guess the realistic assessment of my ability as a hockey player suggested that I'd be better at university, and I had my family doctor, who was a very impressive guy, and he encouraged me to go to medical school, and which I did.
When you went to medical school, can you define one moment that you say, you know what, I'm going to take that field very seriously?
Well, I guess when you're going through medicine, you're often intrigued by the last rotation you were on. So, but the one that hit home to me was the practice of surgery. And so in my final year of medical school, I decided that I wanted to be a surgeon.
And then after that, you went on to be part of the Montreal Canadian organization over 50 years, part of the Stanley Cup Championship, if I'm not mistaken, 15. Can you share any stories about the Habs?
Well, I guess there are many stories. Unfortunately, most of mine are about injuries.
Okay.
And most of it is about the people I met. I think in life it's the people that make the big difference. And there are several people that had a big influence on my life. One was Sam Pollock, who was the general manager, probably the best general manager ever. Toe Blake, who was a hockey coach, but the person who impressed me most of all was Jean Beliveau.
God bless him.
Yeah.
Jean Beliveau, when I think about him, he's one of the pioneers in Montreal, but also across Canada for what he did for the game of hockey.
All across North America even. I mean, he was so, and because he was such a giant of a gentleman, he was an impressive man.
And what did you learn when you were part of the
Well, let
hockey?
me tell you about an episode, and then you'll understand what I learned. You remember John Ferguson?
Yeah.
So he got in a fight. One of the first games I was looking after the Montreal Canadiens because I graduated from the Montreal Junior Canadiens, and Ferguson was knocked out unconscious. So he came in at the end of the second period, and I said, Fergie, you can't play the third period because I think you've had a concussion and it would be dangerous. So he took his hockey stick and he was going to take a round out of me. And I said, so Jean Beliveau came on the scene and he said, Doc, don't argue with him. And I said, let me deal with it. So I went to my office, and he took Ferguson into the clinic, which was right by the corridor, locked the door and left him there for the third period. And he banged, but he didn't get out. He didn't play, and I learned an important lesson about negotiating, which has helped me all my life.
Yeah. Was it a nerve-wracking moment in your life?
Not really. I mean, I was scared because, Ferguson was the tough guy.
He's a tough guy, yeah.
Yeah.
He was one of those big bullies, we call that.
He was an enforcer. He kept everybody honest.
When you look at professional athletes and you deal with regular people in life. Can you elaborate exactly what's the difference between making a surgery with an athlete compared to a regular person?
Well, an elite athlete is a well-trained machine. I mean, they're such excellent physical condition, and they're training to protect themselves from injuries. So they're a very special breed compared to you or I. And so the goal for the NHL player always is to get back in the game. So that's very special. Makes it, the incentive is there to get well.
Any proud moment of your career so far? Your proudest moment, you look back, you're like, damn.
Well, I guess in my medical career, I guess the proudest moment was when I became president of the American Association for the Surgery of Trauma. And it was only Canadian. And so that was probably my most signal honor.
That's great to hear that. And also because a lot of people, when they go to that medicine field, it is so competitive, so hard to get that. It's only a few that stand out, that you're one of them. When you hear your name was named after you at the Montreal hospital, after your name, what was your initial reaction?
Well, that was very, very, very emotional when they named the trauma center after me, because trauma care is something I've worked on for my whole life, and then this is a good trauma center, so I'm proud to have my name associated with it. It was a very important day.
When you look back on the people who wants to be in your position, in your shoes, to be in medicine, what kind of advice you give to them?
I've had many people ask me how to get the job to be a doctor and then the team doctor for the Canadians. And I said, you just have to be in the right place at the right time. But you have to, dream big and accomplish your dream.
As a guy who has a full-time schedule ahead of you, on daytime you're at the Montreal hospital, in the afternoon you're going to the media, deal with athletes. Is there a lot of toll in your body, and how do you manage to do that?
No, I never felt any toll in my body. I loved every minute of it. For me, it was an honor and a pleasure, and I still enjoy going to every game because I like hockey. I've always enjoyed hockey, and to work with the best team is, and we have such an amazing team of therapists and physicians that work with me. It really is a fun, no stress.
When it comes to surgery, a lot of people has like a different approach. Like when people want to study, you want to be great. How was your approach when someone has, like, say, who doesn't feel very well, has a broken head? What is your approach in the surgery process? How does it work exactly, for the viewers who wants to know?
Well, as a surgeon, you're trained, and particularly as a trauma surgeon, you're trained to have a plan for every episode. And sometimes you have life-threatening, you have a gunshot wound, somebody is shot. Your goal is to stop the bleeding and restore normal anatomy and physiology. You spend a whole, I spent 6 years in general surgery and thoracic surgery training to learn that. And in trauma, we know the priorities are the ABCs, the airway, the bleeding, and cardiac. So those are important principles, and they're drilled into you so that they just become automatic when you're faced with a situation, whether it's in the operating room or on the ice.
One more question before I let you go. Give me your top 5 greatest Montreal Canadian hockey player of all time for the Habs.
The top 5, well, Jean Beliveau, of course, would be my top. Bob Gainey, Kirk Muller, Andrei Markov. Yeah, he was exceptional. And then, there are many others. There's so much. I always liked Henry Richard. I didn't get to experience Morris, but Henry was one of my heroes.
Am I mistaken or not, Saku Koivu, that experience you had with him, the way he was injured, can you elaborate exactly on that? What exactly?
Yeah, that was one of my most heart-wrenching. When Saku Koivu came over to Finland for training camp, and he presented with abdominal pain. Turned out he had a Hodgkin's or a lymphoma type, and we had to get him. And that's the nice thing about my job, is that I have all the resources of McGill University to focus on him, and he got chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and then made a full recovery. And his return to play that night was probably the most emotional event in my life. It was very, very touching.
Yeah, I remember watching that game because I was one of the biggest Koivu fan, I still is, and I did not know, but making my research, that you were part of that. And to me, it's like that's a stump in your legacy, because you're part of the max priority. Patriarity, my bad. Yeah. Second Koivu, Mr. Markov, Andrew Markov as well too. And those are significant players that we had.
And Trent McCleary, I think, with the airway injury, the puck injury to his neck, was life-threatening.
Yeah.
As was Saku Koivu's illness. So those are all very, very critical management.
How do you deal with that? Because you're so used to that. Is it for you like, oof, I'm trying to focus to heal that person as much as I can, or you're like?
Well, you're reacting to what you were taught. I mean, and with Trent McCleary, if we didn't solve his airway problem, he would die. Mm-hmm. And so we took him on from the Bell Center to the Montreal General Hospital. Mm-hmm. Remember, on that Sunday afternoon, and it was we held his jaw open to keep the airway open, mm-hmm. and then did a tracheostomy and then later on a chest tube. But that was probably the most serious injury.
All right. Mr. Bolton, we'd like to put the end to this interview. Thank you so much for assisting on my show, Stat TV show. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Good. I'm pleased to be here. Anytime. Good.